The crystal champagne flute shattered against the marble floor of the Okoye mansion in Victoria Island, Lagos, sending shards skittering across the imported Italian tiles. Adanna Okoye, daughter of billionaire industrialist Chief Emeka Okoye, stood frozen in the center of the grand living room, her unseeing eyes wide with terror as her father's voice thundered through the house. "What do you mean she can see?" Chief Okoye's words cut through the air like a blade. "My daughter has been blind since birth. 17 years. Are you calling me a liar?" The poor beggar woman, Mama Ngozi, trembled before him, her worn wrapper dusty from the streets of Lagos. But she didn't back down. "Sir, with all respect, I saw what I saw. This morning at the gate, when your security wasn't watching, your daughter looked directly at me. Not past me. Not through me. At me. She saw the scar on my left cheek. She saw the blue wrapper I was wearing. She saw everything." Adanna's perfectly manicured hands flew to her face, and for the first time in her life, tears that had nothing to do with blindness rolled down her cheeks. The truth she had hidden for 3 months was about to destroy everything. But what Mama Ngozi didn't know, what nobody in that room knew yet, was that Adanna's ability to see again was only the beginning of a secret so dark, so twisted, that it would shake one of Nigeria's most powerful families to its core. Because Adanna had discovered something the day her sight returned. Something about her father. Something about her mother's death 5 years ago. And someone was willing to kill to keep that secret buried. The room fell deadly silent. Chief Okoye's face had gone from red with anger to ash gray. His eyes darted to his daughter, searching, questioning. Behind him, his new wife, Zainab, stood with her hand pressed against her throat, her expression unreadable. "Adanna," Chief Okoye said slowly, his voice now dangerously quiet. "Look at me." It was a test. A test Adanna had avoided for 93 days. She kept her eyes fixed on a point just past her father's shoulder, exactly as she trained herself to do since she was a child. Her heart hammered so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. "Chief Okoye, sir," Mama Ngozi pressed on, her voice gaining strength. "I am a poor woman. I have nothing to gain from lying. But I have 6 children to feed, and I cannot stand before God with a lie on my tongue. Your daughter can see. I know it like I know the sun rises in the east." "Get out," Chief Okoye whispered. "Sir, please, I only came here because—" "I said get out." His voice exploded through the mansion. 2 security guards appeared immediately, grabbing Mama Ngozi by her arms. As they dragged her toward the door, she locked eyes with Adanna one final time. And in that moment, Adanna made a choice that would change everything. She looked back. Really looked back. Mama Ngozi saw the recognition, saw the desperate plea in those eyes that were supposed to be blind, and she understood. This girl needed help. This girl was in danger. The heavy doors slammed shut, and Adanna was alone with her father and stepmother. "Well?" Chief Okoye demanded. "Some mad woman from the street comes into my home with crazy accusations, and you just stand there?" Adanna opened her mouth to speak, but before she could form the words, her stepmother Zainab moved closer, her expensive perfume filling the air. "Emeka, darling, perhaps we should call Dr. Obi. Have him examine Adanna again. Just to be certain." After all, that woman seemed very convinced. There was something in Zainab's voice. Something that made Adanna's blood run cold. Because Zainab knew. Somehow, her stepmother knew the truth. And if Zainab knew, that meant Adanna's time was running out faster than she'd thought. The USB drive hidden in her room contained evidence that could send her father to prison for life. The journal she'd found in her late mother's belongings told a story of betrayal, murder, and a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of Nigerian society. And the reason for her blindness, the real reason she'd lost her sight 17 years ago, was the most horrifying truth of all. But she had made one critical mistake. She had trusted the wrong person with her secret. And now, as she stood in that opulent living room surrounded by lies and luxury, Adanna realized that the beggar woman who'd just been thrown out might be the only person who could save her life. If you're already hooked by Adanna's story, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. And go ahead and like this video because this story is about to take you on a wild ride through the streets of Lagos and into the heart of a mystery that will leave you speechless. What would you do if you were Adanna? Would you reveal the truth or keep pretending to be blind? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. 3 months earlier, Adanna had woken up in her bedroom to see sunlight for the first time in 17 years. She remembered screaming. Not from joy, but from pure, overwhelming terror. The world had colors, sharp edges, and details she'd only imagined through touch and sound. Her fingers, which had traced the patterns on her silk bedsheets 1,000 times, now showed her that the fabric was champagne gold, not the cream color she'd always believed. The walls of her room weren't smooth and plain. They had texture, tiny imperfections, shadows that danced when the ceiling fan rotated. But it was the photograph on her nightstand that changed everything. Adanna had stumbled out of bed, her legs shaky from the shock, and picked up the silver frame she'd held countless times before. Her mother's face stared back at her, beautiful, elegant, wearing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Adanna had always been told this picture was taken at a charity gala 2 weeks before her mother died in a car accident. But now that she could see, she noticed something no one had ever mentioned. In the background, barely visible behind her mother's shoulder, stood a man. His face was slightly blurred, but Adanna could make out enough details. Tall, lean, with a distinctive tribal mark on his left cheek. And he was holding something, a small brown envelope. The same type of envelope Adanna had found hidden in her mother's old jewelry box just a month before, tucked behind a false bottom she'd discovered by accident while searching for her grandmother's bracelet. That morning, 3 months ago, Adanna had made a decision that probably saved her life. She told no one about her restored vision. Not her father, not her stepmother, not even her best friend Kayamika. Instead, she spent her days pretending to be blind while secretly learning to navigate a world she could finally see. At night, when the mansion grew quiet, she investigated. She learned to move through the house as she always had, touching walls, counting steps, calling for her guide dog Max. But now she could see the things people tried to hide. Documents left carelessly on her father's desk. Whispered conversations between her stepmother and unknown visitors. The way the household staff exchanged nervous glances whenever her mother's name was mentioned. And then, 2 weeks ago, she found her mother's journal. It was hidden in the library, tucked inside a hollowed-out copy of Things Fall Apart, on a shelf too high for the old blind Adanna to reach. But the new Adanna, the one who could see, had watched her stepmother Zainab retrieve something from that exact spot one evening. After Zainab left, Adanna had climbed the ladder and discovered the truth. Her mother, Chinua Okoye, hadn't died in a car accident. She'd been murdered. And the journal contained names, dates, and details of a corruption scheme involving her father's construction company, government contracts worth billions of naira, and buildings that collapsed because Chief Okoye had used substandard materials to maximize profit. 73 people had died in those collapses. 73 families destroyed. And Adanna's mother had discovered the truth. She'd been planning to go to the authorities. The journal's last entry, dated the day before her death, read, "Tomorrow, I take the evidence to the EFCC. God forgive me for what this will do to Adanna, but I cannot let more innocent people die. Emeka has become a monster, and I am the only one who can stop him." But Chinua Okoye never made it to the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. Her car had gone off a bridge on 3rd Mainland Bridge in Lagos, and the official report said she'd swerved to avoid a pothole and lost control. Adanna knew better now. Her mother had been silenced. And as she read through page after page of her mother's elegant handwriting, she discovered something even more disturbing. The reason for her own blindness. According to the journal, Adanna hadn't been born blind at all. At age 2, she'd witnessed something, her mother didn't specify what, and shortly after, she'd fallen mysteriously ill. When she recovered, her sight was gone. The doctors called it a rare neurological condition, possibly trauma-induced. But Chinua had written, "I know what Emeka did. I know he poisoned our baby girl to protect himself. What kind of father destroys his own child to hide his sins? I've collected samples. I have proof. When I expose him, I'll make sure Adanna gets the treatment she needs." There's a specialist in South Africa who says the damage might be reversible. Adanna's hands had shaken so violently when she read those words that she'd nearly dropped the journal. Her father had deliberately blinded her. Her own father. And then he'd killed her mother to prevent the truth from coming out. Now, standing in the living room after Mama Ngozi's accusation, Adanna felt the walls closing in. She'd been careful, so careful, but somehow she'd slipped up. Maybe it was last week when she'd been watching the gate from her window and made eye contact with the beggar woman. Or maybe someone else had noticed and told Mama Ngozi to come forward. Either way, her cover was blown. "I'll call Dr. Obi right away," Zainab said, already reaching for her phone. "He can be here within the hour." "No," Adanna said suddenly. Her voice came out stronger than she'd intended. "I mean, is that really necessary?" The woman was obviously confused. "Maybe she's mentally ill. I'm sure the guards can testify that I never looked at her." Chief Okoye studied his daughter with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "You're probably right, Ada. Just some crazy woman looking for attention or money." But his eyes said something different. They said, "I'm watching you now." Still, Zainab persisted, it wouldn't hurt to be thorough. What if there's been some miraculous change? What if our prayers have been answered and Adanna's sight is returning? Wouldn't that be wonderful? The way she said, "wonderful," made it sound like a threat. Adanna forced herself to smile, keeping her eyes unfocused, staring at nothing the way she'd perfected over the years. "If it would make you both feel better, I don't mind seeing Dr. Obi. But can it wait until tomorrow? I have a headache." "Of course, sweetheart," her father said, but his smile didn't reach his eyes either. "Tomorrow is fine. Why don't you go rest? I'll have Patience bring you some paracetamol." As Adanna made her way to the stairs, counting steps and trailing her hand along the banister exactly as a blind person would, she heard her stepmother whisper to her father, "We need to talk. Privately." Adanna climbed the stairs slowly, her heart racing. She had maybe 24 hours before Dr. Obi's examination would reveal the truth. 24 hours to figure out what to do with the evidence she'd collected. 24 hours to decide whether to run or fight. But first, she needed to find Mama Ngozi. Because that beggar woman had seen the truth, and something told Adanna that she wasn't just some random stranger who happened to notice her secret. There had been recognition in those eyes. Knowledge. Purpose. Mama Ngozi knew something. And Adanna needed to find out what it was before her father's people found the beggar woman first. Because in Lagos, poor people who knew too much about rich people's secrets had a terrible habit of disappearing. If this story is giving you goosebumps like it's giving me, smash that like button and share this with someone who loves a good mystery. That night, Adanna waited until the mansion fell silent. From her bedroom window, she could see the security lights illuminating the compound's high walls, the guards making their rounds every 30 minutes like clockwork. She'd memorized their patterns over the past 3 months, watching with eyes that could finally see what her ears had told her for years. At 2 a.m., she made her move. Dressed in dark clothes with her phone tucked into her pocket, Adanna crept down the servants' staircase at the back of the house. Max, her German Shepherd guide dog, followed quietly at her heels. Even though she could see now, Max was her alibi. If anyone spotted her, she was just a blind girl who'd gotten disoriented and wandered out with her dog. She knew the security cameras had blind spots. She'd watched the guards often enough to map them out. Slipping through the kitchen door, she made her way to the back gate, the one the staff used for deliveries. The guard posted there, Musa, was usually half asleep during the graveyard shift. Tonight was no exception. Adanna picked up a small stone and tossed it toward the generator house, 20 feet away. The clatter made Musa jump to his feet, grabbing his flashlight and heading toward the sound. The moment his back was turned, Adanna slipped through the pedestrian gate and onto the dark street beyond. Lagos never truly slept. Even at this hour, she could hear distant music from a late-night club, the rumble of an Okada motorcycle somewhere in the distance, the bark of street dogs. The air smelled different outside the mansion's walls. Smoke from suya grills, garbage, exhaust fumes, and humanity all mixed together. Adanna had to find Mama Ngozi, but Lagos was a city of over 20 million people. Where did a beggar woman go at night? Then she remembered something. That morning, when the security guards had dragged Mama Ngozi away, the woman had shouted back at the house, "I'll be at St. Catherine's if your conscience ever finds you." St. Catherine's, where honest people still exist. St. Catherine's Catholic Church was only 15 minutes away by foot. Adanna had attended Mass there with her mother years ago, back when she could only imagine what the stained glass windows looked like. The church ran a night shelter for the homeless in their parish hall. She started walking, Max guiding her as he'd been trained to do, though now she could see the potholes he steered her around, the parked cars he led her past, the sleeping night watchmen outside gated compounds. The streets of Victoria Island looked different at night. The gleaming banks and corporate towers that impressed visitors during the day became dark monoliths looming over empty sidewalks. Here and there, a generator hummed, powering security lights or keeping someone's air conditioning running through another NEPA power outage. Adanna had walked for about 10 minutes when she heard the car. It was moving slowly, too slowly for the empty street. Her heart began to pound. She forced herself to keep walking normally, kept her eyes slightly unfocused, let Max lead her. Just a blind girl out with her dog. Nothing suspicious. The car pulled up beside her, a black Mercedes G-Wagon with tinted windows. Her father owned 3 of them. The window rolled down, and Adanna's blood turned to ice when she heard her stepmother's voice. "Adanna, sweetheart, what are you doing out here?" Adanna turned toward the voice, making sure her eyes didn't quite focus on Zainab's face. "Stepmother? I couldn't sleep. Max needed to go out, and I thought a walk might help my headache." "At 2 a.m.? In the streets?" Zainab's voice was silk over steel. "That's not very safe, is it? Get in. I'll drive you back home." "I'm fine really. We're almost back anyway." "I insist." The car door opened. "Get in, Adanna." It wasn't a request. Adanna's mind raced. If she got in that car, she might never make it home. But if she ran, she'd reveal that she could see, and then what little time she had left would evaporate completely. She was saved by an unexpected ally. "Madam Adanna! Adanna!" A woman's voice called from down the street. "Thank God I found you." It was Patience, the housemaid who'd worked for the Okoye family for 15 years. She came running up, slightly out of breath, her wrapper hastily tied around her nightgown. "Oh, Madam Zainab, thank you for finding her," Patience panted. "I woke up to check on her, I always do when she has headaches, and her room was empty. I was so worried. Come, Adanna, let's get you home before your father wakes up and panics." Patience took Adanna's arm firmly, and Adanna could have kissed her. The maid had just given her the perfect excuse and a witness. Zainab couldn't do anything now without raising suspicion. "Well," Zainab said slowly, "I suppose that's settled then. Patience, make sure she gets back safely. And Adanna, next time you can't sleep, just call someone. We can't have you wandering the streets like a common person." The car window rolled up, and the G-Wagon drove away. But Adanna noticed something as it passed. In the back seat, barely visible through the tinted glass, sat the man with the tribal marks, the same man from the photograph with her mother. "That was close, Madam Adanna," Patience whispered once the car was out of sight. "Too close." Adanna turned to look at the maid properly for the first time, really look at her, and saw something that shocked her. Patience's eyes were sharp, knowing, and completely unsurprised to find Adanna out here alone. "You know," Adanna breathed. "You know I can see." Patience smiled sadly. "I've known for 2 months, child. You stopped bumping into the chair I always leave in the same spot in your room. You started turning towards sounds before they fully registered. And last week, I watched you read a text message on your phone when you thought no one was looking." "Why didn't you tell my father?" "Because I loved your mother," Patience said simply. "She was kind to me when no one else was. And because I know what kind of man your father really is." She glanced around nervously. "But we can't talk here. Come, we need to get you back before you're missed." As they walked back toward the mansion, Patience spoke in low, urgent tones. "Your mother came to me the night before she died. She gave me something, a key to a safety deposit box at Union Bank. She said if anything ever happened to her, I should give it to you when you were old enough to understand. I've been waiting for the right time." "What's in the box?" "I don't know. But Madam Chinyu said it was insurance. Evidence that could protect you if your father ever became a threat. They were nearing the compound now. Patience pressed something small and metal into Adanna's palm. That's the key. The box number is engraved on it. But Adanna, you need to be very careful. Madam Zainab wasn't out driving at 2 a.m. by coincidence. They're watching you now. That beggar woman's accusation changed everything. I need to find her, Adanna said. Mama Ngozi. There was something in her eyes when she looked at me. Like she knew me. Patience stopped walking. Her face had gone pale. What did you say her name was? Mama Ngozi. At least, that's what I heard someone call her. Sweet Jesus, Patience whispered. Adanna, Mama Ngozi isn't just some random beggar. She was your mother's best friend from university. She was at your christening. She's your godmother. The world seemed to tilt beneath Adanna's feet. What? But why is she? How did she? After your mother died, she tried to investigate. She asked too many questions, made too much noise. Your father destroyed her. Got her fired from her job at the bank, turned her husband against her, made sure no one would hire her. Last I heard, she'd lost everything and was living on the streets. Patience gripped Adanna's shoulders. If she risked coming to that house today, it means she has something important to tell you. Something worth dying for. They slipped back through the servants' entrance. Musa was still investigating phantom noises by the generator house. Within minutes, Adanna was back in her room, heart pounding, mind reeling. She looked at the key in her hand, then at her phone. Tomorrow, Dr. Obi would examine her and discover the truth. Tomorrow, her father would know she'd been deceiving him. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, she'd learned that she wasn't alone. Her mother had left her weapons to fight back. Her godmother had risked everything to warn her. And Patience, loyal Patience, had been guarding her secrets all along. Adanna pulled out her laptop and began typing. If something happened to her, the world needed to know the truth. She uploaded copies of her mother's journal pages, the photographs, and everything she'd discovered to a cloud storage account. Then she composed an email to every major newspaper and anti-corruption organization in Nigeria, scheduled to send automatically in 72 hours unless she logged in to cancel it. Her father had taught her that in business, you always needed insurance. Well, she'd just bought herself the most expensive insurance policy of her life. As dawn began to break over Lagos, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that Adanna could finally see and appreciate, she made a decision. She wasn't going to run. She wasn't going to hide. She was going to fight. Because somewhere out there, Mama Ngozi was waiting. And together, they were going to finish what Chinyu Okoye had started 5 years ago. They were going to bring down Chief Emeka Okoye and everyone who'd helped him build his empire on the graves of innocent people. The beggar woman had discovered the truth about Adanna's sight. But that was just the beginning. Soon, the whole world was going to discover the truth about everything else. What would you do if you discovered your own father had poisoned you and killed your mother? Would you fight for justice or try to escape? Let me know in the comments because Adanna's decision is about to set off a chain of events that will change Lagos forever. Dr. Obi arrived at the Okoye mansion at exactly 10 a.m., carrying his medical bag and wearing the same obsequious smile he'd worn for the past 17 years. Adanna sat in the living room, her father on one side, Zainab on the other, feeling like a prisoner awaiting execution. Now, Adanna, Dr. Obi said warmly, pulling out his ophthalmoscope, this is just routine. Nothing to worry about. I'm simply going to check your eyes as I always do. But this time was different. This time, he was looking for proof that she could see. Adanna kept her breathing steady as Dr. Obi shined lights into her eyes, asked her to follow his finger, tested her peripheral vision reflexes. She'd practiced for this moment, trained herself to keep her eyes from tracking movement, to maintain the slight, unfocused gaze of someone whose optic nerves had been damaged since childhood. But Dr. Obi was thorough. Too thorough. Interesting, he murmured, peering into her left eye. Very interesting indeed. What is it? Chief Okoye demanded. Well, Chief, I'm seeing something I've never seen before in Adanna's case. There appears to be activity. Neural response to light stimuli. Her pupils are contracting and dilating normally, which they shouldn't be doing given her previous condition. The room went deathly silent. What does that mean? Zainab asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. Dr. Obi sat back, removing his glasses to clean them, a nervous habit Adanna had noticed he had whenever he was about to deliver news he'd been paid not to deliver. It means that either I'm seeing things, or Adanna's neurological condition has evolved, possibly even reversed itself. You're saying she can see? Chief Okoye's voice was dangerously quiet. I'm saying it's possible. To be certain, I'd need to run more comprehensive tests at my clinic. Visual field tests, OCT scans, MRI imaging. No, Adanna interrupted. All three adults turned to stare at her. She'd been silent too long. Time to take control of the narrative. No more tests. Adanna, her father began. I can see, she said simply, finally meeting her father's eyes directly for the first time in 17 years. I've been able to see for 3 months. The shock on Chief Okoye's face was almost worth the danger she'd just put herself in. Almost. 3 months, he whispered. You've been lying to us for 3 months? Yes. Adanna stood up, her legs steady despite her racing heart. I woke up one morning and I could see. I was terrified. I didn't know what was happening to me. So I stayed quiet while I tried to understand it. Why didn't you tell us? Zainab's voice dripped with false concern. We're your family. We could have helped you adjust, celebrated this miracle. Because I wanted to see the truth first, Adanna cut her off, looking directly at her stepmother. I wanted to see what people do when they think I'm not watching. And I've seen a lot. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. What exactly have you seen? Her father asked carefully. Everything, Adanna said, bluffing now but knowing she had to maintain the upper hand. I've seen your late-night meetings. The envelopes of cash. The documents you hide in your study. I've seen who visits this house when you think a blind girl wouldn't notice. Chief Okoye's jaw clenched. You've been spying on me? Your own father. The same way you poisoned me when I was 2 years old? Adanna shot back. The same way you killed my mother? The slap came so fast she barely saw it coming. Chief Okoye's palm connected with her cheek, sending her stumbling backward. Max barked sharply, moving between Adanna and her father. How dare you, Chief Okoye hissed. How dare you accuse me of such things? I loved your mother. And you ungrateful child, I've given you everything. You gave me blindness. Adanna shouted back, tears streaming down her face. You destroyed my eyes to hide your crimes, and when Mama found out, you murdered her. You don't know what you're talking about, Zainab said, standing up. Your mother died in an accident. And your blindness was a childhood illness. You're confused, probably from the stress of your sight returning. I found her journal, Adanna said. I know about the buildings. The 73 people who died. The bribes. Everything. The color drained from Chief Okoye's face. Dr. Obi had gone very still, very quiet, like a man trying to disappear into the furniture. Where is this journal? Chief Okoye asked, his voice now eerily calm. Somewhere safe. Along with copies of everything else I've found. And if anything happens to me, it all goes to the EFCC, the newspapers, CNN, BBC, everyone. It was a bluff. She hadn't made nearly enough copies. But her father didn't know that. Chief Okoye stared at his daughter as if seeing her for the first time. When he spoke, his voice was cold, businesslike. Dr. Obi, thank you for your time. Please send your bill to my office. The doctor couldn't leave fast enough. Once they were alone, Chief Okoye walked to his bar and poured himself a whiskey. You've put me in a difficult position, Adanna. You put yourself there when you decided to build your empire on corpses. He laughed, a harsh sound without humor. You sound just like your mother. She never understood that in Nigeria, everyone plays the game. The only difference is some of us play it better than others. Mama understood that murder is murder, no matter how much money you make from it. Your mother was naive, Zainab interjected. She grew up privileged, never had to fight for anything. She didn't understand what it takes to build something from nothing in this country. And you do. Adanna turned on her stepmother. Is that why you helped him kill her? What did he promise you? Money? Status? Or did you just enjoy taking another woman's place? Zainab's mask slipped for just a moment, and Adanna saw pure hatred flash across her face. Your mother was a fool who was going to destroy everything. Someone had to protect this family's interests. So you admit it, Adanna breathed. You were involved. I'm admitting nothing, Zainab recovered quickly. I'm simply saying your mother made choices that had consequences. Chief Okoye set down his glass. Here's what's going to happen, Adanna. You're going to give me that journal and whatever other fantasy evidence you think you have. Then you're going to forget these ridiculous accusations. In return, I'll forget this conversation ever happened, and we'll move forward as a family. And if I refuse? Then you'll learn that being able to see isn't always a blessing, her father said softly. Accidents happen every day in Lagos. Buildings collapse. Cars crash. Young girls disappear. It would be tragic if something happened to my poor daughter just when she'd regained her sight. Adanna's phone buzzed in her pocket. A text message. She pulled it out, and her heart nearly stopped. It was from an unknown number. Your godmother is in danger. They found her. Come to St. Catherine's now. Alone. A friend. Who's texting you? Zainab asked sharply. No one. Just Kayamika. Adanna's mind raced. Mama Ngozi was in trouble. She had to get to the church. I need some air, she said, moving toward the door. You're not leaving this house, Chief Okoye said. You can't keep me prisoner. Watch me. He nodded to someone behind Adanna. 2 security guards stepped into the room, blocking the exits. Until you come to your senses, you're confined to your room. For your own safety, of course. Adanna looked around wildly. She was trapped. The guards advanced, clearly intending to escort her upstairs forcibly if necessary. That's when Patience appeared in the doorway, her face stricken. Sir, madam, please come quickly. There's been an accident. One of the generators exploded. Fire is spreading to the servant quarters. Everyone turned toward the commotion. Adanna could smell smoke now, hear shouts from outside. In the chaos, she made her decision. She ran. Max bounded after her as she sprinted through the confusion, past guards rushing toward the fire, through the front door that someone had left open in their panic. She heard her father shouting behind her, heard feet pounding after her, but she didn't stop. She ran down the driveway, through the gate, into the streets of Lagos. A Danfo bus was pulling away from a stop ahead. Adanna pushed herself harder, faster, and managed to jump on just as it picked up speed, pulling Max in after her. Through the back window, she saw the guards reaching the street just seconds too late. She'd escaped. But for how long? As the bus lurched through Lagos traffic, Adanna pulled out her phone. The text message was still there, glowing ominously. Mama Ngozi was in danger. And Adanna was the only person who could help her. But walking into St. Catherine's alone might be exactly what her father wanted. It could be a trap. Then again, leaving her godmother to whatever fate Chief Okoye had planned wasn't an option either. Adanna made a decision. She composed a quick text to Kayamika, her best friend, telling her everything, where the journal was hidden, where the evidence was stored, what to do if Adanna didn't contact her by tomorrow. Then she sent it. Insurance upon insurance upon insurance. The bus rolled on through the city, and Adanna watched Lagos pass by through eyes that could finally see it all. The beauty and the ugliness, the wealth and the poverty, the truth and the lies. She was going to St. Catherine's. She was going to find Mama Ngozi. And whatever happened next, at least she would face it with her eyes wide open. St. Catherine's Church stood on a quiet street in Yaba, its white walls stained gray from decades of Lagos pollution. The parish hall next to it looked even more worn, with peeling paint and iron bars on the windows. Adanna approached cautiously, Max tense beside her, alert to every sound. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and the street was oddly empty. Too empty. Her instincts screamed that this was wrong, but she couldn't turn back now. She pushed open the wooden door to the parish hall. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of incense and old books. Rows of thin mattresses lined the floor, the night shelter Patience had mentioned. Most were empty now, their usual occupants out on the streets trying to earn enough for their next meal. Mama Ngozi? Adanna called softly. A sound came from the back room. Adanna moved toward it, her heart hammering. She pushed open another door and found her godmother sitting on a wooden bench, her hands clasped in her lap, her face bruised and swollen. Adanna, Mama Ngozi whispered, tears streaming down her face. You shouldn't have come. It's a trap. Before Adanna could respond, she heard the main door slam shut behind her. Footsteps. Multiple people. She spun around to find 3 men blocking the exit, large, professional-looking men in dark suits. Security contractors, not common thugs. And behind them stood the man with tribal marks from the photograph. Up close, Adanna could see his face clearly, sharp features, cold eyes, and a scar running along his jawline. Miss Okoye, he said, his voice smooth and educated. My name is Deli Badmus. I work for your father. Well, I solve problems for your father. And right now, you've become quite a significant problem. Let her go, Mama Ngozi pleaded, struggling to stand despite her injuries. She's just a child. She doesn't understand. She understands perfectly, Deli cut her off. Don't you, Adanna? You've been very clever these past 3 months. Pretending to be blind while gathering evidence against your own father. Very clever indeed. Almost as clever as your mother was. You killed her, Adanna said, her voice steadier than she felt. You're the one who forced her car off that bridge. Deli smiled, and it was like watching a snake bare its fangs. Your mother was a remarkable woman. Beautiful, intelligent, and unfortunately, idealistic. She actually believed that exposing your father would make Nigeria a better place. As if one corrupt businessman being removed would change a system built on corruption. So you murdered her. I did what was necessary to protect valuable business interests. Just as I'm about to do what's necessary now. He nodded to his men. Search her. She has a phone, probably recording this conversation. Take it. One of the men grabbed Adanna roughly, pulling her phone from her pocket. She didn't resist. There was no point. But as he searched her, she caught Mama Ngozi's eye. Her godmother gave an almost imperceptible nod toward the window behind her. Where's the journal? Deli demanded. Safe, Adanna said. Where you'll never find it. We'll see about that. Your father wants it destroyed, along with any other evidence you've collected. And then, sadly, you and your dear godmother are going to have a terrible accident. Perhaps a robbery gone wrong. Lagos is such a dangerous city after all. People know I'm here, Adanna lied. If I don't check in within the hour. Your friend Kayamika? Deli pulled out his own phone, showing her a photograph that made her blood run cold. It was Kayamika, sitting in a coffee shop, completely unaware she was being watched. We've been monitoring all your communications since yesterday. We know about your little insurance email. We know about the cloud storage. We know everything. He was bluffing. He had to be. But the photograph of Kayamika was real enough. What do you want? Adanna asked. First, the journal. Second, the passwords to your accounts. Third, the location of anything else you've hidden. Give me these things, and perhaps your friend doesn't have an unfortunate accident on her way home from school. Adanna's mind raced. If she gave him everything, she and Mama Ngozi were dead anyway. But if she didn't, Kayamika might be hurt. She needed time. She needed help. She needed. The window behind Mama Ngozi exploded inward. Glass shattered everywhere as a figure crashed through, rolling and coming up in a fighting stance. It was a woman, young, athletic, dressed in jeans and a t-shirt. She moved like lightning, her fist connecting with the nearest guard's throat before he could react. Run! The woman shouted at Adanna. Chaos erupted. Deli's men lunged forward, but the woman was faster. She swept one man's legs out from under him, used his momentum to throw him into another. Max launched himself at the third guard, teeth bared. Mama Ngozi grabbed Adanna's hand. This way. They ran through a back door as the sounds of fighting echoed behind them. The door led to a narrow alley, piled high with garbage and smelling of rot. They didn't stop running until they'd put 3 blocks between themselves and the church. Finally, Gasping for breath, they ducked into a small provision store. The owner, an elderly Igbo woman, took one look at Mama Ngozi's battered face and Adanna's terrified expression and ushered them into a back room without asking questions. "Who was that woman?" Adanna panted. "I don't know," Mama Ngozi admitted. "But she saved our lives." They sat in silence for a moment, catching their breath. Then Mama Ngozi reached out and cupped Adanna's face in her weathered hands. "Let me look at you properly. Let me see those eyes that can finally see." Tears rolled down Adanna's cheeks. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry they hurt you because of me." "Hush, child. This isn't your fault. Your father has been hurting people for decades. Someone had to stop him eventually." Mama Ngozi's own tears joined Adanna's. "You look so much like your mother. So much like my dear friend Chinyu." "Tell me about her," Adanna whispered. "Tell me about my mother. The real her, not the perfect saint everyone pretends she was." Mama Ngozi smiled sadly. "Your mother was brilliant and brave and sometimes reckless. We met at the University of Lagos. She was studying law, I was studying accounting. We were going to change Nigeria together. Fight corruption, help the poor, make the system work for everyone." She laughed bitterly. "We were so young, so naive. What happened?" "Life happened. She fell in love with your father. Back then, Emeka was different, or at least we thought he was. Charming, ambitious, full of dreams about building a construction empire that would modernize Nigeria. By the time Chinyu realized what he'd become, she was trapped. She had you, and she loved you more than life itself. She wrote in her journal that he poisoned me," Adanna said quietly. "That I wasn't born blind. That I saw something I shouldn't have when I was 2 years old." Mama Ngozi's face darkened. "You saw Emeka meeting with a politician in his study. You were just a baby, wandering in when you shouldn't have. They were exchanging money, a bribe for a government contract. You startled them, and in his panic, Emeka grabbed you roughly, shook you. The politician left quickly." "That's why he poisoned me? Because I saw a bribe?" "No, child. That night, you got sick with a fever. The doctors said it was meningitis. But Chinyu was suspicious. She had your blood tested privately, and they found traces of heavy metals, lead, mercury, things that shouldn't have been in a toddler's system. When she confronted Emeka, he denied everything. But after that, he became paranoid. He started watching you constantly, worried about what you might remember, what you might say as you got older. So he finished the job," Adanna said numbly. "Made sure I'd never be able to identify him or anyone else. Chinyu spent years trying to prove it, trying to find evidence that would hold up in court. But Emeka was too careful. Then she discovered the construction fraud, the collapsed buildings, and she realized she finally had something that could bring him down. Something bigger than just what he'd done to you. But he killed her first." "Yes." Mama Ngozi gripped Adanna's hands tightly. "And after she died, I tried to continue her work. I went to the police, to journalists, to anyone who would listen. But Emeka was too powerful. He destroyed my reputation, my marriage, my career. Within a year, I lost everything. Why did you come to our house yesterday? After all these years of hiding, why reveal yourself now?" Mama Ngozi's eyes were fierce. "Because I've been watching you for months, Adanna. I saw the moment your sight came back. You were standing at your bedroom window, and I saw your eyes focus, saw your expression change. I knew then that God had given you a gift, a chance to finish what your mother started. But I also knew Emeka would eventually realize the truth. When I heard through my network, yes, even beggars have networks, that Zainab was asking questions about whether anyone had noticed anything different about you, I knew I had to act. So you deliberately exposed me. I forced the situation before they could make you disappear quietly. Now it's out in the open. Now they have to act publicly, which means they have to be more careful. It bought you time." The shop owner knocked on the door. "Sorry to disturb, but there are men in suits asking questions on the street. You should leave through the back." Mama Ngozi stood up, wincing from her injuries. "We need to get that journal and whatever else you've collected. We need to make multiple copies and get them to people we can trust." "Who can we trust?" Adanna asked desperately. My father owns half of Lagos. The police, the politicians, the media. Not everyone can be bought, Mama Ngozi said firmly. Your mother knew that. That's why she documented everything. She was building a case so airtight, so public, that even Emeka's money couldn't silence it. They slipped out the back of the shop into another alley. The sun was setting now, painting Lagos in shades of orange and red. Adanna thought about her father, about Delhi and his men, about Kayamika in danger because of her. She thought about her mother, dying alone in a car at the bottom of the lagoon because she tried to do the right thing. And she thought about the 73 people who died in those collapsed buildings. 73 families destroyed by her father's greed. Where's the journal hidden? Mama Ngozi asked. In the library at home. Inside a hollowed-out book. Then we need to get it before they do. That's impossible. The house will be locked down. Guards everywhere. Not impossible, a voice said from behind them. They spun around to find the mysterious woman from the church standing there, barely winded despite the fight she'd just been in. She was tall, with short natural hair and intelligent eyes that reminded Adanna of her mother. Who are you? Adanna demanded. The woman smiled. My name is Kemi Lawson. I'm an investigative journalist with The Guardian. And I've been investigating your father for 3 years, waiting for someone brave enough to help me bring him down. She extended her hand to Adanna. Your mother was my mentor when I was starting out in journalism. She taught me everything I know. When I heard she died, I didn't believe it was an accident. I've been digging ever since, and now I'm so close I can taste it. But I need that journal. I need your testimony. I need everything. Adanna looked at the stranger who claimed to want to help, then at Mama Ngozi who nodded encouragingly. How did you know where to find us? Adanna asked carefully. I've been following you since you left your house, Kemi admitted. I have contacts who monitor security communications. When I heard your father's men were setting up an ambush at St. Catherine's, I knew I had to intervene. How do we know we can trust you? Kemi pulled out a worn notebook from her bag. Adanna recognized it immediately. It was identical to her mother's journal. Your mother gave this to me 3 days before she died. It's her backup copy, with different information than what she kept at home. She was smart enough to know she needed insurance. Adanna took the notebook with shaking hands. Her mother's handwriting covered every page. At the top of the first page, she'd written, For Adanna, when she's old enough to understand. I love you, my precious girl. Be brave. Be smart. And never stop fighting for the truth. The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. We're going to finish this, Kemi said softly. Your mother, Mama Ngozi, me, and now you. We're going to expose every crime, every bribe, every death. We're going to make sure those 73 people didn't die in vain. Are you ready? Adanna wiped her tears and straightened her shoulders. She'd spent 17 years in darkness and 3 months hiding in plain sight. She was done hiding. I'm ready, she said. Let's bring him down. Have you ever had to choose between protecting yourself and fighting for justice? What would you do in Adanna's position? Drop your answer in the comments and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Getting back into the Okoye mansion required a plan so audacious that Adanna was certain it would fail. But Kemi Lawson had done her homework. Your father's hosting a fundraiser tonight, Kemi explained as they huddled in her small apartment in Surulere. Politicians, business people, society women, all of Lagos elite will be there. The house will be crowded, security will be focused on the guests, and in all that chaos, we can slip in. Security knows my face, Adanna pointed out. But they don't know mine, Kemi said. And they definitely don't expect you to walk in through the front door like a guest. That's exactly what they did. At 8 p.m., a hired car dropped Kemi and Adanna at the mansion's gates. Adanna wore a wig, long, flowing braids instead of her usual short natural hair, and heavy makeup that transformed her face. Dark sunglasses completed the disguise. She looked like any other young socialite arriving fashionably late to a party. Kemi had dressed as a photographer, complete with professional camera equipment and press credentials that looked authentic because they were. The Guardian had actually assigned her to cover the event, not knowing she had ulterior motives. Names, the security guard at the gate asked, checking his tablet. Kemi Lawson, the guardian. And this is my assistant, Chioma Nwosu, Kemi said smoothly. The guard scanned his list, found Kemi's name, and waved them through without a second glance at Adanna. Just like that, they were inside. The mansion had been transformed into a glittering showcase of wealth. String lights draped across the gardens, a live band played high-life music on a temporary stage, and waiters circulated with trays of champagne and small chops. Adanna had attended hundreds of parties like this growing up, but seeing it all through eyes that worked was different. She could see the forced smiles, the calculated conversations, the transactions disguised as pleasantries. She could see her father holding court near the pool, surrounded by admirers. He wore a white agbada embroidered with gold thread, looking every inch the successful businessman and philanthropist. Zainab stood beside him in a designer gown, laughing at someone's joke. Looking at them now, knowing what they'd done, Adanna felt her hatred burn cold and focused. The library? Kemi whispered. Upstairs, East Wing. But we need to wait for the right moment. They mingled, Kemi snapping photos while Adanna kept her head down. Then Adanna spotted an opportunity. Her father's lawyer, Chief Afolabi, was making a speech, calling everyone to gather around. This was it. While all eyes were on the spectacle, Adanna and Kemi slipped into the house through a side door. The interior was quieter, with only a few staff members rushing between the kitchen and the garden. Adanna led Kemi up the back stairs, her heart pounding with every step. These were the stairs she'd climbed blind for 17 years, counting each one. Now she could see the family portraits lining the walls, her mother's face smiling down at her from happier times. They reached the library without incident. Adanna went straight to the shelf, climbing the ladder to retrieve Things Fall Apart. Her hands were shaking as she pulled out the hollowed book. Empty. No, Adanna whispered, checking again. No, no, no. What's wrong? The journal, it's gone. Someone took it. Are you sure this is the right place? Yes. I put it here myself, I've checked it a dozen times, it was here yesterday. Looking for this? A voice said from the doorway. They spun around to find Zainab standing there, holding the journal in her manicured hands. Behind her stood two security guards, blocking the exit. Clever disguise, stepdaughter, Zainab said, walking into the room. But not clever enough. We've been monitoring the guest list all day, waiting to see if you'd be foolish enough to come back. When a photographer suddenly added an assistant who wasn't on the original manifest, well, that seemed worth investigating. She tossed the journal onto a nearby table. I found this 2 days ago. Been reading your mother's fairy tales about justice and truth. She always was dramatic. That doesn't belong to you, Adanna said. Nothing in this house belongs to you anymore, Zainab replied coldly. You're a thief, breaking into private property. These guards witnessed you stealing from your own father. Very sad, really. The stress of regaining your sight must have driven you mad. Kemi raised her camera. I'm documenting this. Whatever you're planning, it's on record now. Oh, the little journalist wants to play hero? Zainab smiled. Guards, please escort these trespassers to the security office while we call the police. And do confiscate that camera. We can't have unauthorized photos of a private event. The guards moved forward. Kemi tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. Adanna's mind raced, searching for options, finding none. Then Mama Ngozi walked into the library. She wasn't alone. Behind her came Patience, and behind Patience came a flood of people, household staff, drivers, gardeners, cooks, people who'd worked for the Okoye family for years, watching and waiting. Madam Zainab, Mama Ngozi said calmly, I don't think these guards will be escorting anyone anywhere tonight. What is this? Zainab demanded. How did you even get in here? Through the servants' entrance, of course, Patience answered. Where we've always entered. Where people like us are invisible to people like you. One of the guards reached for his radio, but a gardener stepped forward, a large man named Chidi who Adanna remembered had worked there since she was small. I wouldn't do that, Chidi said quietly. We outnumber you 20 to 1. And we're tired of watching this family destroy lives. You're all fired, Zainab snarled. Every single one of you. We already quit, Patience said, right after we decided to stop being silent about what we've seen in this house. The midnight meetings. The envelopes of cash. The threats. The way Madame Chinyu died and nobody asked questions because they were too afraid. You have no proof of anything, Zainab said, but her voice had lost its confidence. Actually, Kemi said, pulling out a small digital recorder from her pocket, we have this entire conversation on tape, including you admitting to stealing evidence and attempting to frame Adanna. The color drained from Zainab's face. And we have something else, Mama Ngozi added. She pulled out a USB drive. Copies of every document from Emeka's study. Bank statements, emails, communications with government officials, contracts showing substandard materials. Everything. Your husband wasn't as careful as he thought. When you're rich and powerful, you forget that the people who clean your office can also read. How long? Zainab whispered. How long have you been collecting this? 17 years, Patience said. Since the day Madame Chinyu first confided in me that she suspected her husband was a criminal. Since the day she asked me to watch, to document, to remember. She knew she might not live to see justice done. But she believed her daughter would. Adanna felt tears streaming down her face. Her mother had planned this. All of it. She'd built a network of ordinary people, invisible people, people her father had dismissed as beneath his notice. And they'd been watching, recording, waiting for the right moment. We need to go, Kemi said urgently. Now before. Before what? Chief Okoye's voice boomed from the hallway. He strode into the library, Deli Badmus beside him, along with 4 more security contractors. Before I deal with this little rebellion? He looked around the room, his face a mask of contempt. Servants playing detective. How quaint. Patience, I'm disappointed in you. After all these years, this is how you repay my generosity. Generosity? Patience laughed bitterly. You paid me minimum wage while you spent more on your wife's shoes than my annual salary. You call that generosity? I gave you a job. A roof over your head. Without me, you'd be nothing. Without us, you'd have no one to cook your food, clean your house, or maintain your empire of lies, Patience shot back. We're done being your invisible servants. Chief Okoye's eyes finally landed on Adanna. My own daughter. You've made your choice then? You choose them over your family? You're not my family, Adanna said, her voice strong and clear. You're my mother's murderer, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it. Her father's face hardened. Deli Badmus reached into his jacket. But before he could draw whatever weapon he was reaching for, something unexpected happened. The police arrived. Not just a few officers, a full tactical unit, led by a woman in a crisp uniform with commander's insignia on her shoulders. She strode into the library like she owned it, her presence commanding immediate attention. Chief Adanna Okoye, she announced, I'm Commander Hawa Ibrahim from the Special Fraud Unit. You're under arrest for corruption, fraud, manslaughter, and murder. We have warrants for you, your wife Zainab Okoye, and your associate Deli Badmus. Chief Okoye's mouth fell open. On whose authority? Do you know who I am? I know exactly who you are, Commander Ibrahim said coldly. And I have 3 weeks' worth of evidence that's been submitted to my unit anonymously. Bank records, witness statements, engineering reports on the buildings that collapsed. And about an hour ago, I received a very interesting package containing a journal written by your late wife, along with corroborating documentation. She looked at Kemi. I believe we have you to thank for that, Miss Lawson? Kemi smiled. Just doing my job, Commander. Adanna stared in shock. But the journal was a copy, Mama Ngozi explained gently. The real journal has been in Commander Ibrahim's hands since this morning. We knew Zainab would find the copy eventually. We wanted her to feel safe, to think she'd won. Chief Okoye's face went purple with rage. This is a setup. I'll have your jobs. I'll have all your jobs. Do you know how many politicians owe me favors? Funny you should mention that, Commander Ibrahim said, because several of those politicians are currently being arrested as we speak. Seems when faced with the choice between protecting you and saving themselves, they chose themselves. We have their statements already. She nodded to her officers. Take them into custody. As the officers moved forward, Deli Badmus made one last desperate move. He lunged toward Adanna, reaching for the USB drive in Mama Ngozi's hand. But Chidi the gardener was faster, tackling Deli to the ground with the force of years of suppressed anger. That's for Madam Chinyu, Chidi growled as officers rushed to restrain Deli. Within minutes, Chief Emeka Okoye, Zainab, and Deli Badmus were in handcuffs, being led out through their own mansion as party guests watched in stunned silence. Cameras flashed, not from hired photographers, but from journalists who'd been tipped off anonymously about what was going to happen. The story was already spreading across Lagos like wildfire. Adanna stood in the library, surrounded by the people who'd risked everything to help her, and felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. How did you know the police would come? She asked Commander Ibrahim. Your mother and I went to law school together, the commander said quietly. When she died, I knew it wasn't an accident. But I couldn't prove it, and I didn't have the rank or resources to investigate a man as powerful as your father. So I waited. I worked my way up. I built a reputation for integrity. And when Miss Lawson contacted me 3 weeks ago with preliminary evidence, I knew the time had finally come. She put a hand on Adanna's shoulder. Your mother saved my life once, back in university. A boy was harassing me, and she stood up to him even though he was the vice-chancellor's son. She taught me that justice is worth fighting for, no matter the cost. I've been waiting 17 years to repay that debt. Outside, Adanna could hear her father shouting, threatening, demanding lawyers. But his voice was growing fainter as they led him away. The reign of Chief Emeka Okoye was over. But Adanna's story was just beginning. 3 months later, Adanna stood in front of the Lagos High Court, cameras pointed at her from every direction. The trial had been the most publicized in Nigerian history, with every major news outlet covering it daily. The evidence had been overwhelming: bank statements, engineering reports, witness testimonies from the household staff, and most damning of all, her mother's journal detailing everything. Chief Emeka Okoye, Zainab Okoye, and Deli Badmus had all been found guilty. Her father received 25 years for manslaughter, corruption, and conspiracy to commit murder. Zainab got 15 years as an accessory. Deli got life for the actual murder of Chinyu Okoye. They'd found the mechanic he'd paid to tamper with her mother's brakes, and the man had confessed everything in exchange for a lighter sentence. But the convictions were only part of the story. Miss Okoye, a reporter called out, "What will you do with your father's assets now that they've been seized by the government?" Adanna stepped up to the microphone that had been set up on the courthouse steps. Mama Ngozi stood beside her, no longer dressed in rags but in a simple, dignified wrapper and blouse. Kemi was there too, along with Patience, Chidi, and all the other staff members who'd risked everything to help bring the truth to light. The court has ruled that the assets obtained through criminal means will be used to compensate the families of the 73 people who died in the building collapses, Adanna said clearly. Additionally, I've established the Chinyu Okoye Foundation for Justice and Accountability. Every naira from my father's estate that isn't going to victims will fund this foundation. What will the foundation do? Another reporter asked. We're going to help other people like me. People who've been silenced, who've been victims of powerful men who think they're above the law. We're going to provide legal support, protection, and resources to whistleblowers and survivors. We're going to make sure that what happened to my mother never happens to anyone else. And what about you personally? A third reporter called. You've inherited nothing. You're essentially homeless. What will you do now? Adanna smiled. I'm not homeless. Mama Ngozi has invited me to stay with her while I finish secondary school. After that, I'm going to university to study law, just like my mother did. And then I'm going to spend the rest of my life fighting corruption and seeking justice for people who can't fight for themselves. Your father says he's innocent, that he was framed. What do you say to that? I say that the evidence speaks for itself. 17 years of documentation doesn't lie. 73 bodies don't lie. My mother's journal doesn't lie. And the dozen government officials who've already been convicted based on the evidence we provided, they're not lying either. She paused, letting her words sink in. My father had everything: wealth, power, respect. But he wanted more. He was willing to kill for it. To poison his own daughter. To murder his wife. All for money and status. I hope he has 25 years to think about whether it was worth it. The press conference continued for another 20 minutes, but Adanna's mind was already elsewhere. Tomorrow, she had an appointment at the ophthalmology clinic at Lagos University Teaching Hospital. The doctors wanted to study her case, how her sight had mysteriously returned after 17 years of blindness. They believed the toxins her father had used to blind her had somehow metabolized out of her system, or that her young brain had found new neural pathways to process visual information. Adanna had a different theory. She believed her mother's spirit had given her back her sight at exactly the right moment, when she was old enough to understand, old enough to fight, old enough to finish what Chinua Okoye had started. Call it divine intervention, call it coincidence, call it whatever you wanted. Adanna chose to call it justice. After the press conference, Adanna and her small group of supporters walked to a nearby restaurant for lunch, not the five-star establishment she'd grown up in, but a small local bukateria in Yaba that served the best jollof rice in Lagos. They sat around a crowded table, sharing food and stories and laughter. Kayamika was there too, having testified at the trial about the day Adanna had texted her everything. I still can't believe you were pretending to be blind for 3 months, Kayamika said, shaking her head. You're the best actor I've ever seen. I had 17 years of practice, Adanna replied with a small smile. Patience raised her glass of Maltina. To Madame Chinua, who saw the truth and refused to look away. And to Adanna, who inherited her mother's courage. To Chinua, everyone echoed, clinking their glasses together. As they ate and talked, Adanna felt a presence beside her. She turned to find an elderly woman standing there, tears streaming down her weathered face. Are you Adanna Okoye? The woman asked. Yes, ma. My son died in the Lekki building collapse 7 years ago. He was only 23. An engineer, so bright, so full of dreams. The woman's voice broke. They told us it was just a terrible accident. That these things happen. But I never believed it. I knew someone was responsible. She took Adanna's hands in hers. Thank you. Thank you for giving my son justice. Thank you for making sure the man who killed him will pay. You gave me something I thought I'd never have, closure. Adanna stood and embraced the woman, both of them crying now. I'm so sorry for your loss. I'm so sorry my father did this to you, to your family. You are not your father, the woman said firmly, pulling back to look Adanna in the eyes. You are your mother's daughter. And she would be so proud of you. Over the next hour, more people came, family members of the other victims, people who'd lost everything to her father's greed. Each one thanked her. Each one shared their story. Each one reminded Adanna why this fight had been worth it. By the time they left the restaurant, the sun was setting over Lagos, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. Adanna stood on the street corner, watching the city come alive with evening traffic, street vendors setting up their stalls, children playing football in empty lots. This was her city now, not the isolated, privileged Lagos she'd known from behind the walls of her father's mansion, but the real Lagos, messy and complicated and beautiful. The Lagos where most people struggled to survive while a few lived in obscene luxury. The Lagos where corruption was so endemic that people had stopped expecting justice. But things were changing. The trial had sparked something, a conversation, a movement. People were no longer accepting that the rich and powerful could do whatever they wanted without consequences. More whistleblowers were coming forward. More cases were being investigated. More corrupt officials were being arrested. One family's tragedy had become a catalyst for change. Ready to go home? Mama Ngozi asked, coming to stand beside her. The word felt strange. Mama Ngozi's small apartment in Yaba was nothing like the mansion Adanna had grown up in. It had only 2 bedrooms, unreliable electricity, and the bathroom had to be shared with 3 other families in the compound. But it also had something the mansion never had: love, honesty, and people who cared about her for who she was, not what she could give them. Yes, Adanna said. Let's go home. As they walked through the crowded streets, Adanna thought about her mother, about the journal she'd kept, knowing she might not live to see justice done but believing her daughter would. About the network of ordinary people she'd enlisted to watch and wait and remember. Chinua Okoye had been 17 years ahead of her time, planning for a daughter who was still blind, still a child, to one day grow up and finish the fight she'd started. And Adanna had done it. With help, with support, with an entire community of people who refused to stay silent anymore, she'd brought down one of Nigeria's most powerful men. But this was just the beginning. Adanna pulled out her phone and opened the Notepad app. She began typing a list of things to do: finish secondary school, get into law school, learn everything she could about Nigeria's legal system, build the foundation into something powerful enough to challenge corruption at every level. She had 17 years of blindness to make up for. 17 years of seeing the world through other people's descriptions and assumptions. Now that she could see for herself, she wasn't going to waste a single moment. The billionaire's daughter had been born blind, or rather, made blind by her father's cruelty. But a poor beggar woman had discovered the truth, and that truth had set in motion a chain of events that changed everything. Mama Ngozi had seen Adanna's eyes focus on her that day at the gate, and instead of staying silent, instead of protecting herself, she'd chosen to speak up. That one act of courage had saved Adanna's life and brought justice to 73 families. Sometimes, Adanna thought, the poorest people were the richest in the things that mattered: courage, integrity, compassion. And sometimes, losing everything was the only way to find out what was truly worth having. As they reached Mama Ngozi's compound, a group of children ran up to Adanna, asking for her autograph. She'd become something of a celebrity, especially among young people who saw her as a symbol of resistance against corruption. She signed their notebooks and posed for selfies, laughing at their excitement. These children were growing up in a Nigeria where they'd seen a powerful man brought to justice. They were learning that speaking truth to power was possible, that corruption wasn't inevitable, that change could happen. That night, lying on a thin mattress in Mama Ngozi's spare room, Adanna stared at the ceiling and smiled. She could see the cracks in the plaster, the gecko hunting mosquitoes in the corner, the faint glow of streetlights through the worn curtain. She could see everything now. And she was never going to close her eyes to injustice again. So what did you think of Adanna's journey? Would you have had the courage to expose your own father if you discovered he was a criminal? Do you think justice was served, or should the punishments have been harsher? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, if it made you think differently about courage and justice, then do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and share this video with everyone you know. Stories like this need to be told. Truth like this needs to be heard. And together, we can make sure that no more Adannas have to suffer in silence while powerful people destroy innocent lives. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the greatest power isn't money or status. Sometimes the greatest power is simply the courage to tell the truth. See you in the next story.